Good evening. It's now 6 p.m. and the May 6th meeting of the Dublin Center Remote Services District Board of Directors is called to order. Please join me in the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Johnson?
Here.
Director Von Heater-Leopold?
Here.
Director Govindarao?
Here.
Vice President Halkett?
I'm here.
President Goel?
Present. Moving on to item 4, special announcement and activities. Item 4A, presentation by and award to winners of the Excellence in Water, Wastewater, or Recycled Water Research category of the Alameda County Science and Engineering Fair and Contra Costa County Science and Engineering Fair. Staff.
So good evening. We have some fun and exciting special announcements this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Erin Steffen, the district's Public Affairs Program Administrator, to lead us through these presentations.
Good evening, President Goel, members of the board. Each year, DSRSD joins with other water wastewater agencies to sponsor the Alameda County Science and Engineering Fair and the Contra Costa County Science and Engineering Fair, as well as to present awards to outstanding projects which tackle water and wastewater related topics. This year, we're proud to share that there were 5 projects within DSRSD's service area which won the Excellence in Water, Recycled Water, Wastewater Research Award. This is a record for our agency. 4 of these teams are joining us tonight to be recognized for their efforts. The 5th team will be recognized by Central SAN at their board meeting due to the nature of their project topic and our agency's overlapping boundaries and respective services. So each team will be invited up to the podium to briefly share information about their project and to receive questions from the board. After all the presentations, we'll take photos of each project team with the board. So I will start things off with from Alameda County. We've got Dion Vaccaria from Quarry Lane High School in Dublin, who's going to present on his project, Autonomous Solar-Powered Robot for Cleaning Trash in Rivers. So Dion, come on up.
So, hello, this is my project. It's called Clean Current. So, as she said, it's an autonomous solar-powered robot that picks up trash in rivers and lakes. So, I've been continuing off this project from a previous year. So previously, I tried to make a submarine, which did the same thing. But I kind of realized that most trash floats instead of goes deep underwater. So I moved to a more boat or pontoon type of design. So basically, this design has 2 modes. It can be controlled autonomously or it can be controlled with a remote. So there's a certain button that you have to press to engage the autonomous mode, and to collect the trash, there is a camera which is connected to a brain, which is a Raspberry Pi. So most of the stuff I've used for my project are off the shelf. So I didn't. Most of it kind of totals to about $300 for the entire project. So at first, the remote for the results or the data, the remote control portion of the project conducted. I'm not a great driver of the robot, so I kind of collected less amounts of trash compared to it going in autonomous mode. So mainly to kind of it was kind of difficult to figure out how I could collect this trash without crashing my robot. So I used a sort of extension called OpenCV. So it's there's a code it's a sort of extension to a coding language which allows your camera to see visually. So it's kind of an extension for a camera to see colors, contrast, and stuff like that. So I kind of realized that trash isn't exactly the same color as natural surroundings or water. So I kind of detected kind of main contrasts in water to for my camera to detect the trash and collect it. So yeah, as for how it's built, what it's made of, the 2 hulls are made of polycarbonate. So I decided to use polycarbonate because it's really resistant to a lot of damage, as when you're in rivers and when you're in lakes, like high current or obstacles, yeah, could cause a lot of damage to whatever robot or whatever boat you're using. Also, polycarbonate works really well in water. So its buoyancy is kind of superior compared to other materials. And yeah, that's why I chose that. So also, you may notice that I have a solar panel on the top of my robot. And I decided to use that because to have it running for a longer amount of time is really beneficial. So I had a off-the-shelf lipo battery, which is often used in like RC cars or RC planes, and I have an adapter to connect it to the solar panel. So testing without the solar panel and with the solar panel kind of adds 3 hours of extra life to the battery, which allows it to run for longer times. So yeah, that's pretty much it on how it's made.
Great job. Any questions on this side of mine?
Just what grade are you in? I don't know if I heard that earlier.
I'm a freshman.
You're a freshman. Wow, great job.
Awesome.
Any questions, comments? Well, great work.
That's so cool. I'm
Yeah,
gonna go look-
having been
amazing
in
work.
the watershed and storm drain, I can see that working a lot. I did that design work for a while, so great job. I don't think I could have come up with that when I was your age. So
That's
amazing
cool.
work.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Well done.
So
Good job.
much.
Okay, so moving on to our second group from Alameda County, we have coming from Valley Christian High School in Dublin, Claudine Heine, Chris Chen, and Ananya Kaur, who are going to present on their project, Degradation of Bilge Water Hydrocarbons via Titanium Dioxide Photocatalysis. I practice photocatalysis.
I was going to say repeat that 10 times.
Yeah. Oh, the old photocatalysis is my favorite.
Hi, I'm Ananya Kaur, and I'm a junior at Valley Christian.
Hello, I'm Claudine. I'm also a junior at Valley Christian.
Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm also a junior at Valley Christian.
So I'll start off by giving a quick introduction about what we are trying to solve. So bilge water pollution is a serious problem, to the environment. And just in case none of you know, bilge water is water that's been contaminated with high or heavy metals and high levels of hydrocarbons with other toxins, but mostly comprised of hydrocarbons, which is the area we tackle. But what it does is ships illegally dump untreated bilge water into the oceans, which causes numerous negative effects, obviously, on the environment, such as disrupting marine food chain systems, and it creates oxygen poor dead zones. But overall, it's just ruining the global biodiversity and degrading our environment. So in this experiment, what we do is we use titanium dioxide photocatalysis to purify the bilge water, and to do this in an efficient way and a cost-effective way, while also not really using the addition of too many other chemicals. So this is an environmentally safe process.
Okay, and so in considering our cost-effective method, that is why we opted for titanium dioxide, because usually these pellets are cheaper to get. I believe we got them around for $50 or something. And also titanium dioxide is a catalyst, so therefore it is able to be recovered. And our goal was to be able to find a way that this titanium dioxide could be reused, especially considering in a kind of third world scenario standpoint, which we used for our project. Many places for motorboats do not have access to facilities that are able to just treat wastewater. So finding a method that could be reusable was something that we opted for. And so for our experiment, we used two hydrocarbons, which were motor oil and gasoline, which is a big part of bilge water. And how we indicated that these hydrocarbons disappeared was by creating a sheen in water, and by using the titanium dioxide, and also as well as the usage of UV lights to help see the reaction, and also through using agitation and aeration to also kind of replicate what the movement is like in a motorboat, and also to help kind of diffuse the catalyst more into reaction, as well as a teabag mesh system that we use to put the titanium dioxide pellets in, which also helped to diffuse the catalyst and also allowed for it to be reused. This helped to optimize for a more cost-effective method and also allowed for the sheen to disappear. And also, this proved to be an indicator that was effective in treating bilge water.
Yeah, so the resulting treatment results after our most optimized process, which was after a lot of trial and error, was a 93.8% reduction in reaction time compared to regular UV treatment, which can already be used in purifying hydrocarbons, and also an 84.8% reduction in COD, which was the quantitative indicator of how we judged hydrocarbon presence compared to the sheen, which is our qualitative indicator. So our final sample also dropped below the accepted wastewater limit of 50 mg per L. So it shows that this sheen method, like just visually assessing the presence of a sheen, is a valid way to tell if your pollutant is there or not. So the implication of this, it suggests a relevant and appealing alternative to whatever other methods there may be. And the most appealing one currently is, at least for those who may not have the resources to spend money or time to treat it, is to dump it over. Because if you can bottle it up and send it to someone to treat it, but that costs you time, costs you money, or you can use a pump or filter to filter out and pump the water back in, but that still leaves you with a sludge that you have to deal with one way or another. So we plan to circumvent this problem altogether by just treating the entire thing as a whole, and you're left with a safe water that is below the wastewater limit, so you can dispose of it however you wish. And yeah, as Claudine mentioned, this method was shown to be very effective and reusable because it's a catalyst, and the system did not show any significant change in performance after repeated runs with the same setup, and was very low cost because we used tea bags because it was relatively endurable. It could endure a lot while also was cheap, and everything used in the setup was pretty accessible to the person and could be assembled really easily. So our future steps would probably just entail researching on how to most effectively and efficiently scale up the setup so that can be effectively implemented in small motorboats and in fishermen boats and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Start off, any questions to my right?
I have a quick one. So would the idea be to use this aboard ship before the discharge or at the source in the ocean when you see a sheen?
Oh, yes. So basically, bilge water builds up in the hull of the ship. So our vision in mind was that you could just scoop up the water, put it in a reactor that was just conveniently placed there, and start it and just let it sit there. And once it finished, you could you could dump it over because then it would be safe to dump.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Any question?
That's great.
Great work.
Woohoo.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Nice job. Great job.
Okay, so moving over to the Contra Costa County winners. Both the winning projects are from Doherty Valley High School and were sponsored by biotech teacher Luis Huertas, who's also in attendance tonight. First project that we will hear from is, presented by Pranav Saravanan. I'm going to try that again. I'm so sorry. Pranav Saravanan and Alanya Drown, and they were presenting on the project Revolutionizing Polluted Water Treatment, Utilizing Lacasse-Loaded Membrane Bioreactors for Sustainable Pollutant Degradation and Water Purification.
I like the lab coats.
Hi guys, my name is Pranav,
I'm Alana.
and our project focuses on using lactase to get rid of textile pollution in our water pathways. So as many manufacturing companies start to grow, we're finding a lot of textile pollution making its way to our water pathways, and this has affected many of our health and the ocean life health in general.
So our procedure was to make different concentrations of lactase and use methylene blue as a simulated textile dye. And we used calcium chloride and sodium alginate on a piece of filter paper and combined it with lacase powder and another sample with concentrations of potato, which we used to sample the methylene blue in a tube, and we left it overnight and over a couple of days.
Yeah, so the main point of our project was to kind of prove lacase's efficiency and how it's natural and very cost efficient. From our results, we discovered that zero point 0.5 grams of lacase was actually very efficient, and it had, I believe, a high absorbance rate and a low transparency rate, and that was the most ideal. That's the best outcome. Um, and we so we basically found out that zero point 0.5 grams of lactase was the most ideal and like the best way of basically getting rid of simulated dye from our wastewater.
So the potato was the next best result. It was very similar to the 0.5 grams of lactase, and the 0.25 grams of lactase was not far behind. So it shows that we can use both potatoes and different concentrations of lactase powder, which was derived from bacteria. And our control group did not have very much change at all, and the dye stayed the same concentration.
Thank you.
That's
Great,
awesome.
nice job. Just remind me, what grades are you both?
We're both seniors.
Seniors. Oh, congratulations. Great.
Any questions? All right.
That's awesome.
Great job.
That's
Congratulations.
awesome. Woohoo.
Thank you.
Well done.
Okay, and the final project that we'll be hearing from this evening is going to be presented by Navya Rawal, Risha Tiwari, Dia Rajaram, and Arush Day. And their project is Phospho Buddy, a novel 3-tiered filtration device for wastewater phosphorus absorption.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. My name is Navya Raval.
My name is Dia Rajaram.
I'm Richa Tiwari.
And I'm Arush D.
And we are 4 seniors who are part of the DBHS CTE department at, for the biotechnology program. And today we're going to be giving you our pitch on Phospho Buddy. So imagine this, 54,000 kilograms of phosphorus being dumped into our local waterways on a daily basis. Well, that's what's happening. This amount of phosphorus is disrupting our local fisheries. It is causing toxic algae blooms and killing marine life in a way we've never seen before. And it's extremely costly to our city. The recent San Francisco nutrient bill, which was proposed to help with this cleanup, had an estimated cost of $1.2 billion and would result in an increase in taxpayer dollars. And this is something we don't want to see happen. Existing solutions are simply ineffective, and we want to create something that's going to be more sustainable and efficient.
We created Phospho Buddy, a 3-tiered novel sustainable water filtration system that not only removes phosphorus from wastewater, but actively recovers it for reuse. It's reusable, it's affordable, and bio-inspired, which is designed for real-world scalability. Requiring low external energy, we can also help keep electricity costs at a minimum. Not only can this system be scaled up for large-scale uses like wastewater treatment plants, it can also be scaled down for individual use cases like homes and residences.
Okay, so we have 3 layers in our filter. Our first tier is duckweed, and duckweed is a fast-growing aquatic plant, and what it does is it soaks up any surface-level nutrients that we can find in the wastewater. Our second layer is something called biochar. It's a carbon-rich material, and it locks in any additional phosphorus. And our most important part is recombinant phosphorus binding protein. What this protein does is it can immobilize onto resin beads, and then it'll attach to any phosphorus that it captures, and it'll hold phosphorus. So we can remove the beads later, and then the water in the bottom should be phosphorus-free or of reduced phosphorus. What we really like about this filter is that, as Arush mentioned, it gives back to the community, and it creates like this circular flow in the economy, because each tier can be reused in some way. We still have to do more research on it, but our duckweed should now be phosphorus-rich. So we want to find a way to repurpose that, maybe sell it back. Our biochar can also go back into be used as fertilizers, and our protein, we can take it away from the beads and then reuse that protein and then reuse the beads as well to make it more recyclable.
And to quickly talk about our results, so after a couple of trials, our results said that about 88% of phosphorus was removed when we used all three of our filters combined. And our filter also, like when we were making it, we also tackled ethics. Our duckweed is an invasive species, so their growth there is monitored so that invasiveness is avoided. Contamination is avoided through resin bonds, and components are added in order to reuse waste. So phosphorus is a finite resource, and we want to turn the waste into value. We've presented this project before and presented a pretty similar speech at the UC Berkeley Bioengineering High School Competition, where we won first place and received over $3,000 worth of equipment to further pursue this project.
Thank you so much for listening to us and join us in building a more sustainable future.
Great job.
That's cool.
Any questions?
Yeah, amazing project. I mean, what inspired you to pick this topic here?
So when we were juniors, we took our Biotech 1 class, and we did this project where we kind of researched duckweed itself, and then we used bioinformatics to like trace back to its DNA and figure out what like protein it came from and cool stuff about it. So once we learned about duckweed and like all its of its uses, and then one of its uses was to be able to capture phosphorus, we also wanted to find similar things that do the same and see if we can like apply it to a more real world problem.
Great. Thank you. It's really awesome.
So you guys are seniors?
Yeah.
All right.
And so do you guys see yourselves taking this the next step with that $3,000?
All right.
Well, look forward to seeing the headlines and the winnings. Yeah, everything that comes with that.
That's
Awesome job. Congratulations.
Nice job.
If the board wouldn't mind coming out in the front, and we'll do some quick photos. Yeah, I'm going to have you come up first. All right, you guys ready? 1, 2, 3. Great. Let me do one with the photo. Okay, thank you. And do you want one with your parents in as well? Yeah, come on. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. That's great. And here we go. 1, 2, 3. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well done.
Claudine, Chris, and Ananya, if you guys could come up next. And then, Deanna, if you wouldn't mind grabbing your tripod as well. Okay.
Alrighty.
Here are the 3 for
How do you want to put that on the
group.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, Ananya, if you want to come right over here, that way I've got you guys kind of centered, and you guys each have certificates of recognition. I don't know if you want to hold those or not. So Ananya is right here. Do you want your certificate? And then Claudine, there's yours, and then, yeah. Okay. Does that work for everybody?
That works. We're almost there.
All right.
This is a little tall thing. There's a height requirement.
All right, is everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. Great, and then come right over here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then we do one with my phone. You guys have parents here tonight too? So I would welcome them to come up. Is everybody you want to invite up? You good? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's do Phospho Buddy. The Phospho Buddy group next. If you guys want to grab your trifold.
Everything good?
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm backing up. Everybody get comfy. There you go. Everyone's cozy.
Scoot in there.
All right. Everybody ready? One.
Hold on.
Do I have? Did I give you the wrong one? Here, I've got other ones. I think I had them all together.
That's the other two.
I'll make sure the right one gets through. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Let me take a couple. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Great. Thank you so much. Perfect. Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you so much. Oh, I see what I did. Yeah, no, it's this one. I swapped out. See ya.
There we go.
There.
Yes.
And then this will go with the last group. There's 2 for the last group. Yeah. Cool. So push. Okay. There we go. Thank you. All right. We got one for everybody? Okay, great. And now we'll go with the combating textile pollution group last. So Pranav and Alana. Okay.
Come on back.
Be in the middle.
All right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Great. 1, 2, 3. And this photo. I know. Thank you guys for your patience. All right, last one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good job. Great job.
Yes, good luck.
Great job.
All you see here is good luck.
Teacher, thank you for supporting me.
We're about to talk about vacancies. So.
All right. Well, feel free. We all know that you guys got education to continue and make a difference in this world like you're already doing. So thank you and congratulations
All done.
one more time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 5, public comment. At this time, those in the audience are encouraged to address the board on any item of interest that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and not already included on tonight's agenda. Comments should not exceed 5 minutes. Are there any speaker cards from the members of the public?
No speaker cards.
Okay. Moving on to item 6, agenda management.
No recommended changes.
Okay. Moving on to item 7, consent calendar. Matters listed under this item are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a member of the board or the public prior to the time the board votes on the motion to adopt. Is there a motion to approve the items under consent?
I'll move.
Okay.
I'll second.
I got a motion by Director Govinda Rao and a second by Director Von Heater Leopold. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? Any abstention? Motion carries unanimous. Moving on to item 8, board business. Item 8A, public hearing. Receive the presentation on job vacancy rates for the district in accordance with Government Code Section 3502.3. Staff.
Samantha Kohler, Human Resources and Risk Manager, will review this item for the board.
Good evening, President Goel, members of the board. This evening's public hearing will address job vacancy rates for the district. During tonight's presentation, we will cover the requirements for this public hearing, review current vacancies and vacancy rates, and review staff recommendations related to recruitment policies and procedures. The requirement for this public hearing is under Government Code Section 3502.3. This is a new requirement as of January 1st of this year. The requirements state that all public agencies, including the district, must hold a public hearing in front of its governing agency or governing body on vacancies at least once per fiscal year. If during a budget year, when a budget will be adopted, the public hearing must be held prior to the adoption of the operating budget. If the vacancy rate for any one bargaining group is more than 20%, then additional information is required, specifically the total number of job vacancies within the bargaining unit, total number of applicants for the vacancies, and the average hiring duration from job posting to completion. Additionally, as part of this public hearing, there's a requirement to review recruitment policies, practices, or procedures if they are impacting the hiring process.
Just for procedure.
Sure.
I want to just go ahead and formally open the public hearing and then note that for the record, the board will first receive the staff report, followed by public comment. If you wish to address the board, please complete a speaker card and submit it to the district secretary before the end of the presentation. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. My apologies.
For the district current vacancy rates, they are required to be broken down by bargaining unit. We actually have 3 bargaining units and then an unrepresented group of employees. For Local 39, we have a total of 4 vacancies with a 4.8% vacancy rate. For Local 21, we have 2 vacancies with a 7.7% vacancy rate. For our mid-management employees bargaining unit, we have 1 vacancy for a 5% vacancy rate. For unrepresented employees, we do have 2 vacancies, so a 16.7% vacancy rate. Overall at the district, our vacancy rate is at 6.4%. As none of the individual bargaining units have over a 20% vacancy rate, we are not required to provide any additional information regarding the total number of job vacancies and the average duration of job posting to completion of hiring. The current list of vacancies at the district includes the 4 our Local 39 department, including Environmental Compliance Inspector 2, our Operations Storekeeper, an Administrative Assistant, and a Maintenance Worker. For Local 21 bargaining unit, we have an Accountant 1-2 position, a Management Analyst. For the mid-management employees unit, our bargaining unit, we have a Laboratory Supervisor, and the 2 unrepresented positions that are vacant are the Special Assistant to the General Manager and the Assistant General Manager. At this time, we'll move into staff recommendations related to reviewing the requirement of reviewing recruitment and policies and procedures. The district has not experienced obstacles in filling district vacancies related to our recruitment policies and procedures. Even though the district has not experienced any obstacles for filling these, staff did implement a change in March of this year to allow for the use of equivalency for experience in lieu of education for meeting minimum qualifications. It's called a combination screening. This change will broaden our external applicant pool while also providing some internal promotional opportunities for our internal staff. There are no other recommended changes related to our recruitment policies and procedures, as we have not experienced obstacles in filling positions. I'm available should the board have any questions.
Do I have any questions? Left side?
Yeah, just a quick question on the unrepresented. That's also included in within the 20% as well?
So unrepresented technically is not a employee group. It's wouldn't fall under the 20%. We listed on here for the purpose of being able to give a district-wide total to the board.
Okay.
However, if it were to be over 20%, it would not trigger the requirement for additional information since it's not a recognized employee group.
Okay. So when you calculate the 6.4%, that wasn't including those two.
It does include that so that we would provide the board with an overall district total. It just, if that particular group were to be over 20%, it doesn't trigger the additional requirements.
May be good to have like two separate tables, one with, one without, just to kind of illustrate that, for the public.
Thank you. I'll note that for next year's presentation. We will be back again.
Any other questions? Any questions on this side? Okay. Now the board will receive any public comments. Do we have any cards?
No speaker cards.
All right. At this point, the public hearing is now closed, and I'll move it back to the board for any discussion. Any discussion items? None? None? All right. With that, any action? All right. Very good. Move on to item 8B. Receive a presentation on the proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2026 and 2027.
Good evening, President Goel, members of the board. Every 2 years, staff prepares operating and capital budgets for the next 2 fiscal years for the board's review and adoption. This review is anticipated to occur over the course of the next 3 board meetings beginning tonight. The board will receive 2 budget presentations, the first on the proposed operating budget for fiscal years 2026 and 2027, followed by a separate presentation on the 10-year capital improvement program plan and 2-year CIP budget. The proposed budgets include appropriate funding and resources to operate the district's 3 business enterprises, address strategic plan priorities, meet the district's contractual obligations for operating the Derwa and Lavma facilities, and to fund replacement of capital assets. The budget also uses long-term financial planning models to assess the financial health of the 3 enterprises and identifies course corrections that may be needed to ensure long-term financial sustainability. I'm very pleased with the proposed budgets being presented to the board this evening. There are a number of issues that are addressed with this budget, including the slowing down of growth within our service area as we approach build-out, and this has affected our revenue projections. Staff has worked hard to limit increases to essential projects and services where possible. Tonight is the first opportunity for the board to provide input on the proposed budgets. Based on the feedback we received this evening, staff will finish preparing the proposed budget documents, the budget books, for inclusion in the May 20th board agenda packet. Depending on the level of feedback we receive from the board, staff anticipates scheduling a public hearing in June for the board to consider formally adopting the operating and capital budgets. And with that, I will turn it over to our Finance Director, Ken Spray, who will introduce the operating budget team and proceed with the presentation.
Okay. Good evening, President Goel, members of the board. Tonight we'll be presenting a proposed operating budget for FY's fiscal years 26 and the fiscal year 27. We'll be hearing from 3 presenters. Samantha Kohler will be giving a presentation on the 2024 workforce study. T. Lucero will be giving a presentation on, as part of the budget, on personnel expenses, and then I will do the remainder. So the slideshow is 45 slides, so it's quite long. Feel free to interrupt and ask any questions that you may like to ask on the spot, rather than waiting till the end. So, next slide there, our agenda. I'll give you an overview of our operations and challenges, proposed revenues, proposed expenses, replacement transfers, 10-year financial planning models, and then our next steps at the end. So the district provides 3 enterprise services. The first is wastewater collection. That's called local wastewater. That's provided in Dublin and South San Ramon. We have a regional wastewater treatment plant, and that's provides services for Dublin, South San Ramon, and Pleasanton. And then, of course, water services, and that's provided in Dublin and Dougherty Valley, San Ramon. Okay, then there's also 2 joint powers authorities that works with the district. They provide recycled water services. Those are the Dublin San Ramon Services District in connection with the East Bay Municipal Utility District. That's called DERWA. and then also the Livermore Amador Valley Water Management Agency, LAVMA, that works with the district for discharging wastewater to the outfall. Okay. Then this next slide is just an overview of our district funds, how they operate. Basically, we have operating funds and we have capital funds. Operating funds are driven by rates. The rates provide funding for the enterprise funds. Those numbers there you see at the bottom, 200, 300, 600, we just put the numbers there, but 200 is local, 300 is regional, 600 is water. When the balance of the working capital in the enterprise fund exceeds a certain limit, that limit would be the maximum, then funds may spill over to the rate stabilization fund, which you see there on the left, those the 5 series, 205, 305, 605. And if the enterprise fund needs additional funding for whatever reason down the road, then funds may also transfer back from the rate stabilization fund over to the enterprise fund. The capital funds, those are financed by capacity charges, and the capacity charges, when we receive them, we allocate them into 2 components, the buy-in component and the expansion component. The buy-in component funds the replacement funds together with these replacement allocation funds that transfer over also. And then the expansion component funds the expansion funds. Those are the 20 series through 23, 26, 20. And okay, next slide. Oh, and actually, let me go over one more thing. And then also just a quick little overview of the funds themselves. We have 3 fund groups. Those fund groups are the local, the regional, and the water. Each fund group contains 4 funds. Contains this operating fund, the rate stabilization fund, the capital replacement fund, and the capital expansion fund. So that's just the way all the accounting works, with lots of funds and lots of things allocated in various different fashions. So next slide. Things taken into consideration for the budget include the 2025 strategic plan, the 2024 workforce study, legal requirements, and sound financial principles for financial policies, transparency, and accountability. Budget challenges for this budget include new and evolving regulatory requirements. We have rising personnel costs, particularly for medical and pension. We have energy resiliency. We have asset replacement needs. And we have revenue that's growing at a lower pace than the expenses. The most recent February to February CPI increase, as you can see there, is 2.69%, which is lower than what the rate study projected. So, next slide, page 9. And that's to be done by Samantha Kohler.
Good evening, President Goel, members of the board. Over the next few slides, I'll walk the board through organizational structure and staffing changes that have been incorporated into the proposed operating budget. The organizational restructuring, and the board will see, my apologies, that didn't go right, that the board will see over the next few slides stem from recommendations from the 2024 workforce study. The purpose of the changes are to strengthen the resiliency of district operations, to ensure the district has appropriate structure and positions to meet current and future service level goals, to address future regulatory and business needs by providing an organizational structure that can adapt as our regulatory and business needs change, and to improve efficiency, such as consolidating like functions and programs together. The organizational changes that you'll see, again, come from the workforce study. It was completed in 2 phases. The first of the 2 phases completed in fiscal year 23, which focused on the staffing and service levels for the operations department. Phase 2 of the study, completed in fiscal year 25, focused on the remaining district departments and district-wide programs, so the administrative services functions, office of the general manager, engineering, and other district-wide programs such as asset management, regulatory compliance, safety.
Actually, a quick question. So would
Yes.
you consider the changes to be fully implemented, or is there a phase 3?
There is not a phase 3, so the study is complete. The recommendations I'm going to walk through, there are a handful that have been implemented, which I'll get to on the next slide, and the others are proposed as changes in the operating budget.
Okay. So now we're just dealing with the financial impact, not the
Correct.
org impact. Thank you.
Correct. All right. The first organizational change reflected in this budget is the separation of our finance from our administrative service functions. This resulted in the creation of a standalone finance department led by our new finance director position, Ken Spray, who's sitting here right now. While these recommendations were from the study, the changes were implemented in August of 2024 to address district business needs, with the new finance director position being allocated from a vacant budgeted position in finance. The finance department now includes the finance, accounting, and utility billing and customer services divisions. The recommendations for administrative services that the board will see incorporated include moving safety from operations to administrative services and creation of a safety, security, and emergency preparedness division. The new division is aligned now in administrative services with similar internal functions and elevates these critical district programs to just below a director level in administrative services. Public affairs was also moved from the Office of the General Manager to administrative services. So there are now 4 divisions that the board will see in administrative services in this budget: the Safety, Security, and Emergency Preparedness Division, Public Affairs, Information Technology, and Human Resources and Risk Management. There are 2 structural changes in the engineering department. The first is the consolidation of the CIP and planning functions under one division. This change will allow for efficiency and collaboration in the planning and implementation of the district's CIP program. With this recommendation is a new engineering manager position to oversee the combined CIP and planning functions for the district. With the planning functions being combined with our CIP now, that leaves a standalone division for asset management in the engineering department, with the additional recommendation for a new asset management supervisor position to oversee the division and to be the point person to formalize the district's asset management program.
Have those positions been filled, or are they posted?
These positions have not yet been filled. The positions are still recommendations, provided the board gives approval or not. The board will see salary recommendations and job descriptions for these positions at a future board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
The last structural change that's been incorporated into this proposed budget is in the operations department, specifically for the district's regulatory compliance program. Given the large and broad scope of regulatory compliance functions at the district with its 3 services, wastewater collection, treatment, and water distribution, as well as the contractual requirements for regulatory compliance functions for our 2 JPAs, there's a critical business need to have centralized and strategic oversight over this large function. As such, the organizational change the board will see is the creation of a regulatory compliance division, including the consolidation of our clean water programs, environmental compliance, and our laboratory functions underneath the operations department. Centralizing the regulatory compliance program will provide efficiency, accountability, and allow for the district to adapt as regulations change or new regulations arise. Included in this recommendation is a new Deputy Director of Operations Regulatory classification to oversee the district's regulatory compliance functions and provide strategic oversight and support for the program. Additionally, there's a recommended additional environmental health and safety technician position to support the more technical components of this large scope of regulatory compliance functions. The staffing strategy used in this budget for implementing these organizational changes, particularly where there are new positions being recommended, is threefold. The first piece is to reallocate vacant FTE to cover these new positions where feasible. In the previous board business item, the board received a presentation on the district's current vacant positions. Some of these vacant positions are proposed to be reallocated to fill all but one of these new positions being recommended on the previous slides. The second strategy is to convert a one limited term FTE to a regular FTE. This is a limited term FTE that was initially adopted by the board in fiscal year 17 and has continued to be requested and approved in subsequent operating budgets since fiscal year 17, which staff believes indicates is a ongoing need for this FTE, not just in a limited term capacity. And as a result of first utilizing vacant FTE to cover the proposed position, the budget only requests one new FTE. This is the new FTE that would be allocated to support regulatory compliance. As the board will see on the table, the budgeted FTE count for fiscal year 25 is 141 positions. The proposed FTE count for fiscal years 26 and 27 is 142 positions. All other positions mentioned in these previous slides are incorporated into the budget using existing vacant FTEs. Of course. Correct, that is the HNS technician. That one is being covered by a current vacant position and it will be unrepresented. Go ahead and turn it back over to Ken.
Thank you, Samantha. So we're up to proposed revenues. Revenue assumptions is the next page. We have three revenue sources. We have service charges, capacity reserve fees, and others. Service charges are driven by a rate study, and that also takes into account projected growth, inflation, and demand. We have capacity reserve fees. Those are also driven by a fee study and projected development. And other revenue assumptions include Dougherty Valley assessment charges, inspection and plan check fees, and administrative fees for construction in progress and JPA labor time charged back to those projects. Okay. The next slide on revenues. So for revenues, we can see in total for the fiscal year 26 budget, $106,119,000. That's a 5.9% increase over the fiscal year 25. And then we can see for FY27, we have a $112,446 revenue total revenues, which is 4.2% for 27 over 26. That subtotal there you see, it's operating revenues. That's service charges, others, and interest. So those are the subtotal operating revenues. And then we have the percentage change, and those are the operating revenues, and then that generates the operating surplus after the expenses are deducted from it. Capacity reserve fees, they were higher in FY25. There was a decrease by 43% down to $11,662,000 in FY26. And then an increase up again in FY27, $14,058,000. That's a 20% increase over FY26. Our total revenue base for FY26 is this $106 million. I'm looking at the donut circle on the right-hand side. For FY26, $106,119,000. Service charges comprise 71% of our total revenue sources. Capacity reserve fees are 11%, others are 11%, and interest is at 7%. Okay. So now we'll dive into the individual fund service charges. Fund 200 is our local system.
A quick question on the previous slide. What's driving the big jump in interest? The people we hired, we're expecting to have them do a better job of managing the portfolio, or is there some other assumptions in there? That's a pretty big jump, 4475 to 7253.
Ken, do you want to? I can answer. Or the 2025 was based on budget, and it was a pretty conservative number of 2%. So even without the hiring Chandler, it was going to be a higher number based on what we've been performing at. But we did bump it up a little bit, expecting a higher performance with Chandler.
So, all right. So the actuals are going to come in higher than the 4475.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
And then the change in capacity with reserve fees. It's a pretty dramatic drop. I'm assuming we're making some
It is.
more realistic views of how much development's going to actually happen in Pleasanton and Dublin.
That's correct, Director Halkett. And when we get to the CIP presentation, they're going to have some more additional information on the projections for capacity reserve fees. But we are projecting more conservatively based on what we're aware of in the pipeline, but also the general trend that we're seeing. The capacity reserve fees are declining.
So just to add to that, I mean, kind of, or to comment, you were mentioning, Jan, that it was 2%, going back to the interest, and we're projecting closer to 4%, I think, from those discussions we've had. Is that a fair statement?
Over 4% on the interest?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
that's
so
correct.
that's probably that jump.
Yeah. You know, actually, Director Govinda Rao, before we move on, I just want to give T. Lucero, our financial analyst, a chance to comment on what the assumption is for interest that we've assumed for fiscal year 2026 and 2027.
Yes, so we have three different pools. Like we have one in the camp, we have one in the LAIF, and the managed portfolio. So the weighted average would be 3.3% in 26, and then 3.4 in 27, if I remember correctly. It's not up to 4%.
Okay, but it's currently at 2, for 2025? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
It was currently assumed in the 2025 adopted budget at 2%.
Okay.
But when the actuals come in and the board sees the quarterly financial report for 2025, we've performed at a higher level. I believe we just submitted the treasurer's report, and you are at?
At 3.5.
Okay, great.
Correct. For this, because we haven't closed out fiscal year 2025, so we compare against budget.
Okay, so we're gonna be way over budget on. Is that correct?
Yeah, optimistic.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay, if we're being
very
optimistic,
positive.
absolutely. Okay, and then just to add to Director Halkett's thing on the capacity reserve fees, so that we're going to see that continue to probably decrease, right? Correct. So, just a question is that going to then translate potentially down to increase in rates down the road because to make up that difference?
Correct. One of what the board will see in the capital improvement program presentation is the buy-in component that we receive that helps fund capital replacement needs is anticipated to diminish over time as capacity reserve fees go down. And so that additional funding would need to be made up from the enterprise operating fund transfers.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
On to 200 service charges. So we're at 5,187,000 for FY26, and that's service charges, and that's just slightly a 0.8% over FY25. And the reason for that small increase is that they were over budgeted in the prior year. And so then the FY27, of course, is the correct increase, and that's 5.1% over the FY26 budget. Okay. And Fund 300 service charges, 1.2% increase over FY25, and that's for the same reason, over budgeting in the prior year. And FY27 is 3.9% over FY26. Okay. Fund 600 service charges, 4.8% over the FY25. And then 4.1% over FY26, and the water service charges are tracking exactly with the rate study. Okay. Other charges, capacity reserve fees, those are going to be upcoming in the CIP budget. That's going to be presented by engineering. We have investment earnings, and they're now under an active investment manager. We have other revenues. That's the Dougherty Valley assessment charges. Those are pass-through charges over to Zone 7. We have the JPA administrative fees. We have miscellaneous fees. And we have credit card transaction fees that we're now reinstating to not absorb those fees in this budget. Previously and prior to COVID, they were charged back to the customer. During COVID, they were absorbed by the district, and now we're reinstating them back to the customer. So, moving on to proposed expenses. Expense assumptions are based upon 2024 workforce study, historical actual expenses or usage trends, vendor quotes, request RFPs, local long-term agreements, annual JPA O&M budgets, the DERWA adopted budget for FY26 that was adopted on April 28th, and then the LAVMA adopted budget also was adopted on May 21st to consider for FY26 budget. Okay. Then on this large overall expenses by category, T. Lucero is going to give a presentation on the personnel budget, so I won't go into that. She'll give a breakdown of it. So there's not too much to comment on. This was a very challenging budget. We extensively paired things out of it and got it down to where we have it now. These charges for these budgeted amounts for materials, water purchases, contracts, those are all very consistent between years. We don't feel that there's much of anything to discuss about them. The same goes for the smaller charges. Expenses in total are 5.3% over FY25. This $91,908,000, and FY27 is 4% over FY26. Okay. And then I'll turn it over to T, and T is going to give a breakdown of the personnel budget.
Good evening, President Goels and members of the board. My name is T. Lucero. As I got to use our new ERP system to prepare the personnel budget, I got a chance to present to you for the very first time. On this slide is the district-wide total salary and benefit for the next 2 fiscal years. We also included this year budget, so for comparison, overall, we expected an increase of 10.3% in fiscal year 26 and followed by a 5.2% increase in 27. In the next few slides, I'm going to go over the 3 largest items: the salaries, the pension costs, and the other post-employment benefit or OPEB. For salary, on the right side of the table is the district total 142 position salaries, if approved, listed by department. We expect an increase of 3.9% in each of the fiscal year. And on the left side, we just want to show you a beautiful picture of how you allocate the most valuable asset, which is us, the human capital, to deliver the water and wastewater services. Coming at number 1, our operation department would take 60% of the salary, the total salaries, and then followed by 15% for the engineering department, and then finance, administrative services, the board of director, and the office of the general manager. Most of us here are sitting at the 25%, the rest of the happy donut. Yes, we have 1 net additional FTE. Or just like most of other California public agency is experiencing, the district pension cost has been increasing significantly over the last few years. So we want to show here the last 2 years' actual contributions, the current year, and the next 2-year budget. So overall, we expect an increase of 12.8% in 26 over fiscal year 25, and then a 6.7% increase. So these costs are calculated by and allocated to us by the California Public Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS. The CalPERS conducts the actuarial valuation report annually and set forth the required district contribution in 2 separate components. The first row on the table right there is the normal cost expressed by a percentage of the salary, I mean, the payroll. So if it go up and down, so let's say we have a COLA increase, then the cost go up. Or if we have vacancy or employees retire, the cost go down. On the other hand, we have the unfunded accrual liability contribution, which is a fixed annual amount. Oh, I can explain the big increase in fiscal year 25 due to two reasons. Number one is our cost sharing agreement with the employee, where the employee contribute 2% to the district portion is ended in fiscal year 24. So that's the normal cost go up. And then the investment earning in fiscal year 25, which is the fiscal year that PERS used to calculate 25 contribution, UAL, it was negative. So all the agency in the pool get to contribute more to the pool to support the pension cost. And here are the few things that we can do to manage the pension cost. First and foremost is what we have been doing and will continue doing, that is paying the full UAL amount at the beginning of the fiscal year to take advantage of the 3% discount over paying it in monthly installments. Not a lot of agencies can just pay in full, so we do that every year. And the approximate saving is 60 to 80,000 per fiscal year to do so. Second, in October of 2023, the board had directed staff to include a 15% additional discretionary payments toward the UAL. However, we are not include this extra payment in the budget right now, but we will look at the overall financial condition of the district at the year end and to whether to make this additional payment. And lastly, we will also explore the IRS approved Section 115 trust fund. It's the same, the concept of putting fund aside, we select our own investment strategy, grow the asset, and can use it as our discretionary to make the payment during the year that PERS requires to contribute like extra so much more.
No, we would be looking at other providers. There's PARS, there's Keenan, there may be others, but we want to explore that simply because we're limited. To a certain degree, we're limited by whatever the earnings ratio we get from CalPERS, and if we use one of these pension pre-funding plans, we could put it in equities, and so you get a higher rate of return, and then build a balance. Say if it is the 15% contribution, and then in a year when you're short or for whatever the reason is, you can draw from the pre-funding plan and use that to pay pension costs. It could be used to pay down UAL. It could be used to pay normal cost. It doesn't make any difference as long as it's pension, because with these 115 trusts, you can only use them for the exclusive purpose of what the trust was set up for. So. It's been around for quite some time, and apparently it hasn't been looked at, and so we want to look at it, to see what kind of returns we can get, and rather than just putting it into CalPERS and being limited to whatever their rate of return is. Yeah, yeah.
The district offers retiree medical benefit, or OPEB, and similar to pension costs, the OPEB expenses have increased significantly over the last few years. So we want to show here the most significant increase is on the first two row show there. That is the actual district payment to the vendor to cover for medical and dental premium. The previous valuation report 2 years ago, the district funded ratio was 125%. So due to the superfunded, we decided and has been withdrawing from the trust fund to reimburse for those premium payments. And because the latest valuation report, the funded ratios is 88%, so staff proposed we stop the withdrawing from trust and the amount shown there as an increase. Second, the last row on the table, the actuarially determined contribution is our ADC, the contribution to the California Employers Retiree Benefit Trust, or SERP, to fund the future benefit. This contribution amount varies year to year and is determined by the biannual actuarial valuation report. So we want to note here. So we want to note on this slide that the valuation report determined and suggested that the district contribute 1.7 millions to the trust. However, we adjusted down to 500,000 per year because this amount is not a required amount, and because we have other funding needs that we would need to address. Second, our SERP fund is currently invested in the strategy number 2. On the right side, I show the comparison between the two strategy. One, which the expected return in the long run is 6.4% compared to our current strategy is 6.1%, and the actual 5 years also higher. So we want to reverse the SERP fund back to strategy 1. We believe in the long run it will be beneficial. And this is the last slide for my portion. And I'll return it to Ken.
Okay. So just a little comment or a little follow-up on the ADC reduction to this 500,000. What we're required to do by the GASB pronouncement is to obtain an actuarial evaluation and to record a liability. That's the extent of the GASB, and then the funding is not addressed in the GASB 75 at all. And so even though you should submit, and remit the ADC contribution, whatever the actuary says, we reduced that to 500,000 on the basis that the previous actuary evaluation we were funded at 125%, and then there was a big market drop, and then that reduced it down to this 88%. And so the view is, or the view that we're taking is that, we want to see how the investments are going to rebound. And actually, as of March 31st of 2025, they've already rebounded substantially, back up to 33 million, in fact. And the next actuarial evaluation isn't actually due until FY26. And so we feel that these investments, will be rebounding, for purposes of the FY26 actuarial evaluation. And we want to submit, some nominal amount, so that, well, not nominal, but we want to submit some amount, so that we don't submit nothing. Because it does affect credit ratings if you don't fund, and, we're well cognizant and aware of that. So our feeling is that let's let it return to let that market value decline, return, and rebound and return. And then also we're contemplating to switch from the strategy 2 to the strategy 1, also to gain more return on the investments, and see where that takes us. So the FY26 operating budget without transfers. So basically where this stops is this stops at the operating revenue, subtract the operating expenses, and then you get what's called the operating surplus or deficit. So for the local wastewater, we have a $201,000 surplus for FY26, which is very small, but it is a surplus. Then the regional is the one that's the hardest hit, and that has this $413,000 deficit, and that's without transfers. So operating expenses exceed the operating revenues. And then the water is looking very good. The water is $4,449,000 surplus, and so that $4,449,000 surplus, that's what's used for these replacement transfers to transfer over to the capital fund for capital financing. So the regional that has the deficit, whatever amount that we want to contribute, if any, would be be reserve usage that we would use essentially to balance the budget for the regional service, the regional enterprise. Okay. And FY27 operating budget without transfers, then local has an $83,000 surplus, small, but it is a surplus. The deficit in the regional has decreased, so that's a good thing. $285,000 on the deficit. That could also be made up from reserves if we want to. And then the water has a $4,500,000 surplus, and so then that will transfer over to the water replacement fund for capital purposes. Okay. Replacement transfers. So we have a table here of the budgeted replacement transfers for the local. We're not budgeting any in the current year's fiscal years 26 and 27 because we pre-funded them in the prior year. In FY25, there was excess reserves that were transferred over from the operating fund to the RSF, and that gave rise to being able to pre-fund the local wastewater replacement fund. So on regional, we suspended the transfer, the replacement allocation, suspended that one for FY26 to balance the budget, and then we have a reduced amount for FY27 estimated at $1 million to provide some funding over to the capital for capital replacement. And the water, of course, there's no issue with those. Those are both $4 million transfers. So then we do anticipate corrective measures that we'll talk about a little bit later. And, that's the purpose of that is to rebalance these funds and get them operating as planned. Okay. FY26 operating budget with transfers. So this is with transfers. So this is the operating surplus less the replacement allocation. And so for local wastewater, we have a $201,000 surplus. For regional, we have an $871,000 deficit. And for water, we have a $449,000 surplus. And that's the net bottom line after operating surplus and after the replacement transfers are transferred over to the capital funds. FY27 operating budget. Local wastewater, $83,000 surplus, a $1.7 million deficit in that particular year. There's capital needs that need to be done. And for the water fund, it's $394,000 surplus. Okay. Any questions on those transfers?
So stop-in replacement is troubling. I've seen that movie before at other districts, especially. I get it. I know we're in a very difficult budget, so I can swallow 1 year of suspending them.
And reserve usage can be used.
Yeah, and I would like to just make sure staff is cognizant of my unease there, and I want to make sure we have a plan to, over the next couple of years, maybe two budget cycles, but to get the replacements back.
Could you go back to the replacement transfer slide? Just wanted to make a few more comments on this.
The transfer schedule? Yeah,
the transfer schedule. One of the reasons that we took this approach is that if you look at fiscal year 2024, we've talked to the board before that we had some prior period adjustments which had our working capital higher. And so because of that, when we did the rate stabilization fund report to the board, we recommended transferring an additional $5 million in fiscal year 2024. Had those adjustments been in place, we would not have made that recommendation, and that money would have been available to transfer in fiscal year 2026. So that's the way I look at fiscal year 2026 and 2024. But moving forward, we are funding at a reduced rate, and we are going to need to look at restoring that level, especially as we see capacity reserve fees declining.
Right. So as we do our next couple of rate studies, we're going to have to think that through.
Correct.
Got it.
10-year financial outlook. So our assumptions, FY26 and 27 as the baseline, general inflation is scheduled at 3% per year. Energy, 8% per year from 28 to 30, then dropping to 5%. Rate adjustments in line with general inflation. Growth at 1% in Dublin and 0.25% growth in Pleasanton. Vacancy is estimated at 2% of total personnel cost for purposes of the budget. Pension contribution per CalPERS is per the CalPERS schedule, and the $500,000 OPEB ADC contribution is the assumption used in that. Okay. The next slide is the calculation of working capital. We take our audited working capital from the last or most recent audit. We add operating revenues, whether it's the first quarter, second, or third quarter to date, less the operating expenses for the first, second, or third quarter, and we arrive at the ending working capital. The target reserve is 4 months of budgeted expenses in each fund, or 8 months for the combined enterprise and its paired RSF, or Rate Stabilization Fund. The minimum reserve is 2 months of budgeted expenses in each fund, or 4 months for combined enterprise and its paired Rate Stabilization Fund. Okay. The models, the model for local wastewater is not really looking too bad. It's above target for the fiscal years 26 and 27, and then it's above minimum for all the remaining 10 years of the projection, so it is above minimum. That's a good thing. On the local. On regional, regional is above minimum for 5 years of the 10-year projection, so that's a good thing, I guess. And then the remaining 5 years is where it's below, and that drop that you see down there, that's without course correction, of course, what it would look like. And it does pick up in like 33 and 34 and 35 because the LAVMA debt ends in 32. So that's a good thing to end that LAVMA debt. And the water is looking very good. The water fund is above minimum for all 10 years of the projection. It's not a target, but it's good. It's right above kind of the middle center point between between target and minimum. So water is looking good. Okay. Key assumptions for the budget include convert one limited term full-time FTE position to a regular position in finance. Add one FTE to address the regulatory compliance needs. Not recommend, at least for purposes of this budget, the 15% additional discretionary payment to UAL. Contribute the $500,000 per year to the OPEB ADC. Return to OPEB SERP investment strategy 1 for simply for higher earnings. Fund the replacement transfers at a reduced level, at least temporarily. Reinstate the credit card pass-through for customer payments, estimated at approximately $200,000. As I mentioned, it previously was paid for by the customer. It was suspended during COVID, and now we're reinstating it for purposes of this budget. And then we're assuming the FCI Dublin prison remains closed. We're not reinstating that without any data on it. Actions. Explore the pension trust. We just explained that a minute ago. Pre-funded trust for pension. It's a 115 trust to earn higher earnings, and that the 15% is the number that could be used since it was already authorized. Update the 2023 local and regional wastewater rate study. We can do that in FY26. refine and optimize the asset management models to determine a better asset management funding plan through optimizing these models, and then develop integrated operating and capital long-term financial planning models. And we're exploring that with a consultant currently, where it'll be a model where you have an input sheet and plug in the variables, and you can do what-if scenarios and that kind of a thing. So that's what we're looking at. Next steps, we're looking for direction for any changes that we may need to make for this budget. Review the proposed budget on May 20th and hold a public hearing to adopt on June 3rd. So,
Thank you. And so I'll bring it back to the board for any quick comments, and then after that I'll go to the public to see if there's any public comment, and then I'll bring it back to the board for any discussion. So we'll go ahead and start on my right side. Any comments, questions?
No comments. I'm actually very pleased with the sort of conservative direction we're taking with some of these, rather than assuming everything's going to be hunky-dory or that it's going to be awful. So I'm comfortable with the things you've proposed, the changes you've proposed. I don't have any questions.
I do know that Pleasanton continues to talk about their water rates, etc. In fact, it's on the agenda tonight. So, not to bring it up here, but I know staff's watching that, and it might ultimately affect what we see in the coming weeks as far as what they're willing to accept as far as an increase on our behalf.
Thank you. On my left.
I was going to say thank you for the very thorough presentation.
thank you.
Yeah, that was intense. I know it's a tough budget. Replacement concerns me, but I think we have a plan there, and pausing it for a year to get things caught back up. Obviously, the rate study next year is going to be super critical because we have some work to do in regional, it looks like. Moving OPEB to essentially from pre-funding to pay-as-you-go, another thing that's a bit concerning, but hopefully we're not pay-as-you-go for too long. We can get that trust fund back up to snuff. We did that on purpose. What was that? 12 years? I mean, it was many years ago, and it was cool. We had some extra money, and we were able to pre-fund. And I've also seen a lot of agencies get into real trouble having to do pay-as-you-go with OPEB. That can hurt you pretty good. So let's get that cleaned up, and the replacement. Otherwise, great job. I know you guys had to work your butts off on this one. So
Just to comment on the market value of the investments, we recognize that they're kind of they're volatile. They go up, they go down. So I'm pleased that it's rebounded, but there could be another dip, and we don't know.
Oh no, yeah. From the retired guy, my 401k is now a 201k, so I totally get it. So yeah, just keep working it hard.
On that note, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and bring it back for any discussion and any final feedback to staff. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move it on to item 8C. I think staff has enough direction on 8. Okay, 8C, we'll receive the presentation on the proposed capital improvement program, 10-year plan for fiscal years 2026 through 2035, and 2-year budget for fiscal years 2026 and 2027.
As the capital team gets up, a moment to switch presentations. I thought we were going to stretch for a moment.
We're going to go fast. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you guys on that last item for a job well done. Truly do appreciate the thoroughness.
So for the 10-year capital improvement program plan and 2-year CIP budget, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Delight, our engineering services director, and he, along with Jason Ching, our senior engineer over capital projects, will present this budget.
Good evening, President Goel, members of the board.
As Jan pointed out, I'm Steve Delight, the the engineering director. I was last week, and I will be next week too, I think, as far as Steve Delight. Um, I'm here with Jason Ching, and in the audience, Vita Schnoop. They put in a ton of effort on this proposed capital plan. And it's not just them. There's a big team behind them that works on it. There's a bunch of input from operations and everybody around the district. I'd say I'm excited to share this plan. As Ken just went over, there's some challenges, some adjustments we needed to make, but I think it's a great plan. Still a lot of projects that are in the works and that we are working on. What we'll show you tonight is a preview, and then like the full book should be coming shortly. So my notes are on this one, and that one's that one. Anyways, the agenda for tonight is an overview of capital funding, accomplishment of a few of the projects we've completed over the last couple of years, capital improvement program, the development process, how we developed the CIP, and then the draft plan, which is the revenue, capacity reserve fees, transfers, our expenditures, working capital fund projections, and then the next steps. So I will start with a brief overview of funding. All right, so Ken talked about our 3 enterprises, and each of our enterprises is made up of 2 funds. They have, in the CIP, the 3 enterprises, they have replacement funds and expansion funds. And as Ken pointed out, the replacement funds are the 10 funds and the expansion funds are the 20 funds. So it's like a 210, 310, and 320. They all equate to the funds that we're looking at in CIP. We'll talk about how the funds are funded in a few slides. So another quick refresher. On the replacement side, it funds projects and programs, so the 210, 310, 610 projects and programs. And the replacement funds, it's replacing existing assets that we already have, and it's serving existing customers. The 20 funds, those projects, are funding projects that support new development and future customers. All right, Ken had a slide that looked a lot like this, but a little bit different because we had to make sure ours looked a tiny bit different, but it says the exact same thing. So the capital funding, we have the rates, which go into the enterprise funds. Some of that money ends up in the replacement funds through the replacement transfer or replacement allocation. And then there's the capacity reserve fee, which is made up of the buy-in component and the expansion component. The buy-in component, again, is it's going into, if you were a new developer, you're buying into existing capacity in the existing system that was sized for future development in mind. So they're paying their fair share of what was previously constructed. And then the remaining of the expansion component would be for something like a new water reservoir or something at the wastewater treatment plant that is needed for that expansion. So projects have a defined scope and budget. They're non-recurring. They have a minimum cost of $20,000, and they require some type of project management. And it either extends the life of an asset by 3 years or will last at least 3 years. In some cases, projects are split funded between replacement and expansion, and sometimes they even are split across enterprises. Like an example would be if we're going to replace the air conditioner for this building, it supports the entire district, so it's all of the enterprises. But if it's just one thing, like the example we have written on there is a pipeline replacement project, that would be funded just out of the 600 funds. Programs are anticipated but undefined. Funding is based on our various asset replacement models. Approval and authority for the creation of capital projects and programs is outlined in our budget accountability policy and the district code. It's based on guidance provided in the board's budget accountability policy. The general manager is authorized to create a project from a program up to a maximum of $175,000. And the district engineer is responsible for ensuring the projects created from the programs, but before they head to the general manager's desk, meet the intention of the program. When the board adopts an individual project or program budget, like during this process, it authorizes a total budget amount for the program and for the project. So the program, if the program had a maximum funding amount of $500,000, we could only open projects up to that maximum amount. And that's it. Any adjustments to the program budgets would need to be approved by the board. So an example, and I kind of have an example in a couple slides, but an example of a project out of a program would be like there's a water system replacement and rehabilitation program. Let's say we found a little pipeline that had a problem, say at Clark Avenue down the street here. We would create a project out of the program. We think the whole project budget is like $100,000 or so. We make sure that we would create the project from the program, and then we would go ahead and do the work. And that $100,000 project would subtract from the $500,000 maximum cap of that program funding for that year. All right, next slide. So pivot for a second here, and I'm going to talk about a couple of completed or a few completed projects from the current CIP. This is a fun one. This one ended up being a little bit bigger, so it couldn't be. It was created from the program per se, but it had to go to the board because it was larger than $175,000. But it's the Cross Valley Trail Sewer Main Rehabilitation Project. The total project cost was about $300,000. It was funded out of Fund 210. During routine CCTV or closed circuit TV inspection, our field operations crew alerted engineering that they saw a large hole in the side of the pipe going underneath or near the Iron Horse Trail where it goes under the canal there by Del Mar up in San Ramon. And, obviously when we saw this picture, we're like, oh, that's not good. We should do something about that. So we quickly got a project going and repaired the pipe with cured in place piping technology. So it's what we've done elsewhere out here. It's a real cost-effective way to repair sewer mains because it's non-invasive. You're not digging large holes everywhere. It can be done relatively quickly, and you end up with basically a new pipe within the existing pipe. And as you can see on the bottom, it's not orange anymore; it's white. The pipe is in great shape. It extends the life, by industry standard of 50 years or so, but hopefully much longer than that before we need to go out and do something in that area again. Another project that was completed was the Alum Addition project. It was funded out of the wastewater funds, 310 and 320, a $2.6 million project. This is a project that was identified and recommended in the 2017 wastewater treatment plant and biosolids master plan. This project reduces phosphates going into the wastewater treatment plant, which also the goal is to reduce and prevent struvite formation within the equipment at the wastewater plant. The site, this is actually located over at the DLD FSL site on the I'm going to say it backwards, but on the east side, and it treats the water that's coming back from the facultative sludge lagoons. It's high in phosphorus. Another completed project was I think we've talked about this one several times, but the water line replacement project in Wineberry and Canterbury. We replaced about 2 miles of potable water pipeline in the Wineberry and Canterbury neighborhoods. Total project cost of about $6.6 million, funded out of the Water Replacement Fund. This was a great project. We ended up replacing the water mains, the services, hydrants, and the water meters at all of these homes. And what makes me think that it was a great project is it was about 350 homes, and we got almost no complaints. Like there was nobody in here in the boardroom with pitchforks talking about how we've dug up the street, and they're all upset at us. So it was great. The project manager did a fantastic job on this project. The next one is the Energy Facilities Master Plan, another one we've talked about quite a bit. It was funded across multiple funds, total project cost of about $2 million. This facilitated the new energy policy. And the key findings is actually many of the projects Jason will talk about that we're trying to work into the capital plan over the next 10 to 20 years or so. It had a few key points in mind, which is to use up all of the biogas that's generated at the plant, to reduce our electricity usage and our greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. Let's see here. Next slide is talked a bit about the enterprises, funding, the projects we've completed. As we work on the CIP, there's a really prescribed process that we try to follow as we identify projects. So, and of course, in a minute, Jason's going to talk about the 64 projects that are in the proposed CIP. He's not going to talk about all 64. We'll be here way too late tonight. But I'm going to talk briefly about how we prioritize all of the projects in the CIP. And of course, the strategic plan plays a big role with specific goals on long-term infrastructure investment and regulatory compliance. But there's a lot of other factors as well that are going to start popping up here on the screen. So the master plan, health and safety, regulatory compliance, asset management, operational impact, all of these things kind of start popping into as we try to prioritize the projects. Once we come up with like an initial prioritization, I didn't realize this one had so much of a build. We go through, we look at the master plans, we come up with the projects, 10-year projects, asset fleet replacements, new project requests. The next thing we look, oh, I thought that built differently than that, is on the resource allocations. The next thing we look at is like staffing. So we have all these projects. How many projects can we reasonably accomplish that we have the staff right now? Like not just engineers in the engineering department, but also how it's going to impact operations, right? Because they offer input on every single project that we do. And then lastly, and it's not like these things go exactly in this order, we're also looking at the financial impact as well. And are we going to be able to keep our projected funds between the targets and minimum? This is an iterative process. We go around and around and around before we get here. I think that Jason started this process in like August or something like that of last year. And of course, Jason will have more to come on everything. And actually, with that, I'm going to hand the slide deck clicker to, oh, Jason doesn't need it because he's got the computer right there.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Before Jason starts, just going back real quickly on the Cross Valley Trail Sewer
Yes.
project. How was that identified, when that occurred? I mean, how did you guys, was it a neighbor complaint? Like how did?
Oh, no. So routine CCTV inspections.
Oh, that was a routine inspection.
Yep. So are we,
Got it.
depending on where the sewer is, somewhere between every 6 and 12 years, we send a TV camera through every single sewer that we have. And they're looking for things like that for not just holes, but like structural cracks, roots, grease, whatever. And depending on the severity of it, often it's like, oh, there's a crack. Has it changed since last time we looked at it? Well, no, it's probably okay. And then every once in a while,
right,
not that this happens often,
right,
you run across something like that, and it's clearly an issue.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, President Goel, members of the board. My name is Jason Cheng, Senior Engineer in the Capital Projects Division. And so my portion of the presentation this evening will be previewing the draft capital improvement program, the 10-year plan, fiscal years 26 through 35, and the 2-year budget, fiscal years 26 through 27. So at a very high level, and we've discussed this as part of the operating budget discussion, there's significant pressures on the CIP, both on the revenue side, but also the expenditure side. And despite those challenges, I believe staff's developed a capital improvement program that's robust, includes many projects that still accomplishes the district's goals and objectives here. So what I'm going to do is break down this portion of the presentation into 3 sections. We'll cover revenue and some of those high-level pressures that the CIP is facing. The second part of the presentation will kind of discuss the expenditures and highlight some of the projects as part of the CIP. And then lastly, we'll talk about the working capital balances for each of the 6 capital funds. So I think there's 4 themes that kind of govern this draft capital improvement program. On the revenue side, many of us have heard this headline before. The city of Dublin from 2010 to 2020 was recognized as the fastest growing city in California. Basically, there's a lot of open fields that was filled in with homes, As we've heard in Steve's discussion, as we grow in development, we have more capacity reserve fees. As you can see, those open fields are no longer there. We're filling in, and there are going to be less capacity reserve fees coming in, and I'll get into that in a few slides here. So we're approaching build out. The second thing you heard from the operating budget discussion was the reduction replacement transfers. Some of the challenges on the operating budget side that directly replace or directly impact the replacement capital funds. On the expenditures, new energy projects. We're adding about 13 new energy projects, all from the recommendations of the Energy Facilities Master Plan. And those projects have costs associated with those, and we'll get into that. And then, death, taxes, and we should have inflation in there too, as a third truth of life, I guess. And we'll talk about that in the next few slides. So let's talk about revenue. Revenue is primarily driven by capacity reserve fees and replacement transfers. This slide is our historical capacity reserve fees for the regional wastewater fund. And I'm just using the regional wastewater capacity reserve fee funds as an example, but this would apply also to our water and local wastewater funds. In this light green bar shows our projected capacity reserve fees over the last 3 CIPs that we've developed. And then shown in this dark green bar is the actual capacity reserve fees that we collected during those fiscal years. And so I think there's 2 things that we can take away from this slide. One is that our projections don't always match our actuals for many different reasons. One, there's different economic factors. There's COVID, there's rising interest rates. Developers just decide to make changes, and we don't have crystal balls to project that. So in many cases, yes, we're spot on with our projections. 22, 23, and 24 are examples of that. And sometimes we're off, right? 20, 21 is an example. And definitely in 25, we seem to be trending towards that category. The second thing to take away from this slide is that in the last 3 years, we've seen a definitive downward trend in our capacity reserve fees. And that observation here is directly impacting how we're projecting our capacity reserve fees in this 10-year budget. So looking at our projected capacity reserve fees, I'm showing here in the light green what we've projected in our current CIP. 26, 27 is about $15 to about $18 million per year. 34 and 35 is shown as 0 because our current CIP only goes to 33, and that's why there's $0. In our draft capital improvement program, you can see that we have adopted what that trend we see in 25 and really tempered our expectations in terms of capacity reserve fees in short term, 26 through 27. We've only assumed a more modest growth rate between 26 and 29. And then from 30 to 35, we've really, again, tempered our expectations on what capacity reserve fees we'll expect from development. And again, this is an example from our regional wastewater funds, but this same trend, the same graphs, maybe not the same numbers, but the trends would apply for our water funds and our local wastewater funds. This table just shows the various projected capacity reserve fees that we're going to show in the CIP workbook. In orange are the local wastewater capacity reserve fee projections. In green are the regional wastewater capacity reserve fees. And finally in blue are the water fees. Ken and T discussed in the operating budget discussion the impact on replacement transfers. And again, replacement transfers are sort of the overflow from the revenue that we're collecting from the operating side. Obviously, there is some pressures on the operating budget, which sort of has caused us to reduce the amount of replacement transfers that impact our capital replacement funds. So again, this impacts funds 210, 310, and 610. Though that the data here is very it's consistent with the operating budget. You can see that we have $0 in 26 for 210 and 310, and we've reduced some of our numbers in the water fund. We've kept that number consistent between 28 and 35. This is a reduction from what we've shown in our current CIP. And so ultimately, what you're seeing here on the revenue side is reducing our capacity reserve fees. We've also reduced the replacement transfers in the 10-year outlook. On the expenditure side, I want us to start off with just a slide of what our current CIP looks like versus our proposed 2-year CIP. Oh, I'm sorry. Still was wrong there. So in our current CIP, the adopted budget is $71.4 million and included 88 projects, 7 programs, and we supported 22 JPA projects between both DERWA and LAVMA. And if you compare this to our proposed 2-year budget, that includes 64 projects, 9 programs, and 19 JPA projects at a budget of about $92.3 million. So what we've done, you can see here, is that one, we've tried to reduce the number of projects that we're going to try to manage and implement as part of the CIP to better balance our human resources. But you can see that our budgets definitely increased significantly. And that sort of reflects 2 things. One, the complexity of those projects. We are also nearing a lot of the projects that we've been doing right now in the current CIP is in design and planning. And now we expect to enter more of the construction phase for some of these projects, hence why the costs are a little bit higher. It also reflects inflation, right? I've discussed that sort of a little bit in earlier slides, but cost of materials, construction services, design services are all increasing, and that's also reflective of why we're doing less projects, but at higher costs. We can break down our proposed expenditures by expansion and replacement funds. Between the 2-year budget, I showed the 2-year budget and the 10-year plan. And in both cases, it represents the similar breakdown. Approximately 25% of our costs are on the expansion funds, and about the remaining 3/4 is in replacement. And this is also indicative of staff's thesis that we're approaching build out, right? We're doing less expansion projects, more replacement projects. In preparation for this presentation, I looked at our CIP 10 years ago. It was about 45-55 split between expansion and replacement. So again, you can see the trend over the last 10 years where less expansion projects, and it will continue to trend down towards less expansion and more replacement. Here are the expenditures by fund on the various 6 capital funds. You can see about 6 to 9% are local wastewater projects. Approximately a third, if you will, are in our regional wastewater funds. And then the remaining, I would say 55% or so affects our water funds. And these statistics are pretty consistent from the 2-year to the 10-year plan. I'll next talk about some of the project highlights and some of the projects that are key for this particular proposed CIP. Let's talk about master plan initiatives. Steve discussed that we completed the Energy Facilities Master Plan. That recommended about 13 projects that we have incorporated into this proposed capital improvement program. Some of the highlights include the district office solar project, battery storage, some electrical upgrades at the wastewater treatment plant for resiliency and reliability. We've proposed a food waste receiving facility to generate additional biogas to offset power, and then various asset replacements, the replacement of our DAFT and our aeration system, for example. The net impact to our capital improvement program is approximately $75 million. A good majority of that cost, and then that net impact affects Fund 310, which is the Regional Wastewater Replacement Fund.
So these are all in the next 2 years?
No, this impacts our entire CIP.
Thank you. Because I know the food waste receiving is something we were on the fence about before, so I would be nervous if you were moving forward with that without further discussion.
Yes, that is correct. That's the entire CIP, and we are not necessarily proceeding until we do a study of the food waste economics. You're welcome. On our local wastewater replacement expansion funds highlight a couple of projects. One is the Camp Park Sewer Rehabilitation Project. This is a $4.3 million project. We expect to rehabilitate approximately 3,000 linear feet of sewer main. I'm sorry, excuse me, 6,000 linear feet. So a little bit over a mile of sewer main. Our intent is really to complete all the improvements within the Camp Parks area. So we are going to, our intent is to pair this project with a large water main project in Camp Parks. So to replace both the sewer and the water distribution mains at the same time. The water distribution section will be about, I believe it's 3 miles. So it's a very big project for staff, but we hope to combine two projects to gain economies of scale and hopefully drive costs lower and also minimize disruption to customers.
Before you move on from this, it did catch my eye in the original wastewater collection list in the table that you have a little farther down, that the north of 8th Street section of this project for Camp Parks is 10 years out. Is there a reason you drew the line at 8th Street? Is there a reason it's that decoupled?
That, I think it's the other project.
Okay, so
go back to another
14-5001 versus 14-5002.
Okay.
If you look at the timeline, you have 2.8 million future for what is north of 8th Street.
So that
you want to spend 2 million on what you just showed me now.
Yes, that's a good question. So 14S002 and 14S001 are slightly different. I'll focus on your question about 14S001, which is a Camps Park project. That area specifically serves the FCI Dublin facility, and we're currently in design for that project.
So we're gonna put that on.
Put that on hold.
That answers my question. I was thinking that might be it, but I wasn't certain if maybe we'd already done it and I missed it. Okay.
That'd be great.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, so that's kind of
all
the
I
result.
need to know. That there's logic to it.
It's a good question.
Trust you. Thank you.
The other project that I'd like to highlight is a sewer collection system spot repair project. It's sort of related to the project that Steve highlighted earlier. Our field operations division inspects our sewer mains regularly, and through these condition assessments, we are able to identify deficiencies in our sewer mains. And again, instead of our strategy right now as a district is to, instead of replacing these pipelines, which can be extremely invasive and very costly, our proposed approach and strategy is to really rehabilitate, minimizes cost, minimizes disruption to our customers. We are proposing the budget accounts for about 50 segments that we can repair or rehabilitate. So it's about $1.88 million and affects Fund 210. Our idea is to package a lot of these problem spots into 1 or 2 packages to, again, gain economies of scale. On Fund 310 and 320, which are regional wastewater replacement expansion funds, the big project, the largest project in our proposed capital improvement program is a cogeneration engine replacement project estimated at about $44 million. This is split between both Funds 310 and 320. This project was also identified in our energy facilities master plan and has been discussed in length with this board. This is a 5-year project, at least the way we have proposed in the capital improvement program, with the bulk of the costs falling around 2031 and 2032 when we anticipate construction. So our models, our financial models right now assume that we will debt finance the construction phase of this project, which would result in around 2031 and 32 a debt service of about $1.9 million for 30 years. The other project I'd like to highlight is the wastewater treatment plant and biosolids facilities master plan update. One of the strategies that this board adopted for meeting the district's was the district's long-term infrastructure goal. And one of the objectives, or one of the strategies to meet that, is to develop comprehensive master plans that can guide long-term infrastructure investments needed to meet those future demands. So the wastewater treatment plant and biosolids master plan, the current one was last developed in 2017. So we'll update this master plan based on our current and future flow and loading projections. It will address future improvements needed to meet potential regulatory regulations and also these future flow requirements. One of the objectives of this master plan is to develop a nutrient management plan that will define the district's long-term strategy for meeting any nutrient limits imposed by future iterations of the regional board's watershed permit. And so we'll look at various alternatives, ensure if we have a playbook, if you will, to look at those various scenarios and including costs for each of those potential scenarios. Now, with respect to nutrient regulations and requirements, it's worth mentioning that the current and proposed CIP includes a nutrient removal project. The district's current strategy is to use recycled water to meet those goals. And so we feel pretty confident that we can do that. And so the nutrient removal project, if you look at when you are presented the CIP budget book, you'll see that we've replaced that cost to a $0 placeholder. So it will show no cost, knowing that we are going to depend on recycling water as our strategy. But as we update this master plan and those scenarios develop, if those plans show that we should be considering other options to plan for our future, we'll come back in future iterations of the CIP to update those costs accordingly. On the water side, 2 projects: Village Parkway main replacement. This again is a big project. The City of Dublin is leading a street widening project along Village Parkway between Amador Valley Boulevard all the way to the northern boundary at Kimball Avenue. Their project is also known as the Village Parkway Reconstruction and Complete Streets Project. So within Village Parkway, we have a 12-inch water main. And so it was built around 1963. According to our models, it probably has about 8 years left of useful life. But this is an opportunity for us to coordinate with the city, right? There's going to be a lot of work in Village Parkway in the next few years, and both sides of the street are going to be ripped out. And so we took this as an opportunity to partner with the city. We're looking to replace this pipe, yes, a little ahead of time, but in return, we hope we can get some economies of scale by coordinating our work with their work and also minimizing interruption to customers and traffic. The estimated cost is about $7.4 million, and that just represents our portion of replacing our water main. That is correct. Yes. That is correct. Yeah, so their design, we're working with the city's consultant right now to incorporate our water main design into their final project. The last project I will highlight this evening is Reservoir 20B. Again, this impacts our water expansion funds. This is at a cost of about $9.5 million and is been designed to support the development on the east side of Dublin, specifically Francis Ranch, which is shown in that gray area to the bottom right of the screen. We hope to get that bid very soon, hopefully in the summer. We'd really like to get our reservoir constructed before the homes are built. So we're trying to push that project along as quickly as we can. Now the fun part, let's talk about working capital fund projections. We've talked about some of the pressures on the revenue side. We talked about some of the expenditures and some of the projects and some of the rising costs. Like the operating budget, we determine working capital in a very similar fashion. We take our working capital from the prior year and we add the expected revenues for the current year, and that primarily includes capacity reserve fees and replacement transfers. It also includes interest that we're earning, as well as any debt proceeds. And then, of course, we subtract the expenses, which are primarily the project and program costs, our contributions to any capital projects for the JPAs, and any debt service. And then that equals our ending working capital for that given year. We also have a reserve policy, a financial reserve policy that was set by the board. The reserve policy is different for both for the replacement funds versus the expansion funds. On the replacement funds, we look at the 15-year annual average. So not only do we project costs for the years 1 through 10, but we also look at future costs. We take that sum, take the average of that. The minimum reserve is the average, if you will. The target is twice that amount in terms of minimum target reserves. For the expansion funds follow a slightly different standard. Reserve levels are based on 2 components, the project capital expenditures and the debt service over the next 1 to 2 years. So the minimum reserve, as you can see on this screen, is defined as the greater of next year's debt service or the total of the next 2 years' capital expenditures. The target reserve, on the other hand, equals the sum of the 2-year average debt service plus the 2 years of the fund project spending. So we'll go over each of the funds. The first, again, in red there is our minimum reserve. In that purple is our target reserve. So for Fund 210, the blue line represents our working capital between years 2026 to 2035. Relatively healthy in the short term, remaining well above the target reserve in 26 and 27, and then remains above the minimum reserve through the rest of the planning period. For 220, it's hard to discern here, but the minimum and target reserve are the same. The reason for that is there is no debt. As I mentioned, minimum target reserves are based on not only expenditures but also debt. So this is indicative of a fund that has zero debt. That's why there's overlap there. As you can see, working capital balance in Fund 220 is extremely healthy, well above the target reserve throughout the entire planning period. For Fund 310, minimum capital reserve, this is probably, I'll give the general preview, this is the exception to all our other capital funds. And I would say it generally mimics the same trend that the operating budget was showing. We are comfortable in the early short term, 26 to 27, through the mid-cycle, through about 2031, 32, we're comfortably over the minimum reserve. But starting in 2033, we start falling below the minimum reserve. Our financial model also assumes that we will debt finance the construction phase of the cogeneration engine replacement project in 2031 and 32 at about $15.4 million each, which again, as I've mentioned, will result in about a debt service payment of about $1.9 million for the next 30 years. 320, similar story. Our working capital fund balance is nicely over both the minimum and target reserves. Again, you can see the deviation between the minimum and target reserves between 26 and 31 and 32, I should say, because of our debt payment, the LAVMA debt payment, and that comes off our books in 2032, and that's why they converge in 2032, shown at the bottom of the screen. On the water replacement fund, again, strong in the short term, 26 through 27, and above the minimum reserve between 28 and 35. A lot of our expenditures here in the early parts of 26 and 27 are because of projects. We're kind of catching up with projects. We're entering the construction phase of many of our projects. As I've mentioned, we've been in design or planning or design of many of these projects, and we hope to finish the construction portion of these projects. So we're doing some catch up there, and that's why you see a gradual, a steep decline between 26 and 28. And then lastly, Fund 620. Like the other expansion funds, comfortably over both our minimum and our target reserves over the entire planning period. We recognize that, again, we've seen a lot of fiscal pressures, both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. And so as we move forward, asset management will be a key factor for the district and part of our strategy moving forward. A proactive maintenance approach allows us to extend the useful life of existing infrastructure, which could allow us to defer major capital investments when feasible. And then by strategically managing and maintaining our assets, we aim to reduce costs, ensure system reliability, and minimize the need for costly replacements over time. In summary, on the revenue side, there is a decreasing trend in capacity reserve fees. We're approaching build out. There is a reduction in replacement transfers, especially in the outer years. Again, this puts a lot of fiscal pressure on the CIP. We've added new expenditures to the capital improvement program. Approximately $75 million have been added because of new energy projects. And then rising capital costs, specifically because of inflation. All that being said, our proposed capital improvement program is still robust, includes 64 projects, $92 million, and 210, 220, 320, 610, and 620 comfortably remain over the minimum reserve levels over the entire planning period. We do experience fiscal pressure in 310, starting in fiscal year 2033. And moving forward, we will lean heavily on asset management to try to control our cost. So next steps, you saw that it's a similar slide from the operating budget presentation. We presented the draft capital improvement program. We look for your direction, questions, any feedback this evening. We'll review the proposed budget at May 20th. And if all goes well, we hope to adopt the budget on June 3rd.
Thank you. What we'll do is the same method as we did on the last item. We'll start off with any questions, clarifying feedback, move to the public, any feedback from them, and then we'll bring it back for any final comments. Staff had any comments to make? Okay. With that, I'll go ahead and start on my right-hand side. Any questions, clarifying questions?
No questions. I think you've done a wonderful job at trying to anticipate the unknown. Obviously, the key is going to be, as you said, asset management, trying to keep our expenses down as much as possible. But overall, I think you've done a great job.
Yeah, I appreciated the detail in the plan. I'm just curious, how many square feet is the field operations office? Round number?
Several.
What caught my eye was $1 million HVAC project, and it just made me wonder: do we need to think about our utilization of that space? Do we need it? How many people are there? 9 to 5. Realistically, it's a fairly big facility and it's old. And then Gleason, again, it just sits there. Are we better off divesting it versus planning 10 years out to plan something for it? I just think overall it may be worth taking a step back and looking at our real estate and land portfolio, deciding what do we keep, what do we sell, what's a priority? Because it just feels like you're feeding the beast on that one. That's just my general opinion. Thanks.
Okay, on my left-hand side.
Just great presentation. I'll say my, I don't have any questions, but I'll say my comments for later.
Yeah, well done. Reserve targets or fund targets. I know that we've been doing the 15-year averagey thing forever. We've always known it's kind of a kludge. We've talked about for a long time, to leverage asset management that comes with a real reality-based model for what the target should be. So how are we doing on that process? Because I think that's going to help. I mean, my gut tells me once we get real numbers on the assets instead of this a kind of average spend, that will those lines will change a little bit, probably for the better.
Yes, and we did change. We added. Remember, we used to just have a single line on.
Yep.
There was like the reserve, and it was the 2x, and now we've lowered it, so we have the minimum and the target. And yes, I would expect to, as we work through the process to make improvements to asset management, I think the pencil's going to get a little sharper.
So maybe the next time we do this in 2 years, we might be able to have a discussion about what those target levels should be and whether we need to make a policy change.
Correct. And that is also part of the strengthening our long-term financial models and having the capability to look at an integrated model so that we have as
Exactly. That's
capital replacement transfers become more important for the funding of these capital replacement projects, the ability to look at, what does a debt financing scenario look like? What if capacity reserve fees go up or they go down? What happens with inflation? What if there's grant funding? These what if scenarios become more important, and that can affect that.
And what if we
reserve.
learn, like, this pipeline is in much better shape than we thought, so we don't have to
Correct.
budget to replace it in 10 years, maybe 20 years. Got it.
All right. With that, we'll open it up to the public. Does anyone wish to make any comments? Have we received any comment cards? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the dais for any final comments, feedback, or direction that we wish to provide to staff. I'll start on my left-hand side.
Yeah, just again, great presentation. Just one quick comment. So on the summary slide, where you talk about working capital, I think it would be helpful too, where you address the minimal levels and where we are with those, where maybe there's some pressure. It may also be good to have another column to talk about also how those look with targets. And so just having both, kind of side by side. So I know you have it in all of the different slides, but to just summarize that and see which is hitting targets, which is below targets, and looking at it from that aspect as well. That's all I had. Great job again.
Director Halkett? Nope, I said my piece.
I just had one quick thought, maybe in our next discussion. I'd be curious to know what the bubble project is. Is there something that is keeping you up at night? Is there something that, hey, if we have extra manpower, something falls through, we would move this up? Or is there something that you would defer? I'm just wondering where the flexibility is based on the prioritization that you talked about. I'd be very curious to know.
All right. Well, thank you, staff. That was a great presentation, very thorough. I think there's not much left unturned, as you can see. The dais seems to feel like we've hit a lot of the things we want to. And so, with that, I'd like to just thank staff for all of their hard effort. It shows, and I think the community is going to be very happy with what they see coming forward. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 9, reports. Item 9A1, board items. Joint Power Authority and Committee report. I believe there were 2 of them. One was DSRSD and Central Contra Costa Sanitary District liaison on April 21st, and another one being the DERWA board meeting on April 28th.
Well,
Did you-
let Rich go Basically, what we did is to look at the DERWA energy facilities possible upgrade, which both East Bay Mud directors thought were very happy we were looking at that because we all know energy is getting to be quite exorbitant expense. And then we went over the operating budget. Not many comments on that. And we talked about public outreach, and our chair wants to have some kind of an open house, and so we talked about making it at a time when the tours are going out at the treatment plant, so that it was a complete tour. I'm not sure why, but she said many of the local council people had not seen the recycled water plant. So I don't know why, because we've given lots of tours, but whatever. They want to see it. So
No, you covered it. So we did adopt the budget. We didn't just talk about it. So
yes.
so we're adopting good there. And I think we successfully maneuvered that open house little thing all the way into Q3. I made the argument that we're facing a very difficult budget, and our staff is really hard on that, and that the summer is our biggest, most busy time at the plant because we produce all the water that we use in the summer. They agreed, and we can just leverage an existing tour. I know we do them quarterly, so whatever the Q3 tour is, maybe add a little Durwo flair to it. We can make that work. Otherwise, pretty straightforward meeting.
Because there are a lot of new council people that weren't around in the days when we built it.
Yeah. Cool. Right. Any other meeting updates?
Well, for the Central Sam, yeah.
Talking about DERWA.
Yeah. Did you want to go ahead?
Central Sam.
I'll just give a quick brief thing. We talked about the nutrient management strategies from both organizations, so that was interesting discussion. Central San and DERWA also talked about the supplemental supply agreement that we've been kind of pushing for a while, and they're very supportive. Their director is very supportive of this, so really we just need to kind of push to get that done. And so that was kind of one of those things that we were stressing, that we can't keep talking about it. We got to get it done, and because they're very interested in doing it. So
Who were the directors that met with you?
it was Barbara.
Yeah, Barbara. That's Barbara. Pocket.
Yeah, and then just had an asset management program update. So, anything did you want to share, Director Johnson? Anything else I missed? Okay.
All right. With that, we'll move on to item 9A2, submittal of written reports for day of service events attended by directors. I'll start on the left-hand side.
Yeah, I think a few of us attended the Dublin Status of the City, and just a few things. The mayor gave a really nice overview. Dublin's has a, is fortunate to have a budget surplus when a lot of other cities are, not so much in that same situation. Discussed the economic development strategy. Kind of talked about different things coming to Dublin, like AutoZone, H Mart, various restaurants. Current office vacancy is 13.5%. Retail vacancy is at 4.8%. Number, over 2,000 businesses, 40,000 people employed, 4.5% unemployment rate here. And they talked also about the Village Parkway reconstruction project. Coming up, quite interesting, it's a great event, U.S. Army 250th birthday celebration at Don Biddle Park on 6/14. So that's, I'm sure there's other things too, and some of the other directors may want to share some more that I may have missed.
Well, being statistics, they are expecting a $26 million surplus for this year's ending budget, June 30th. That absolutely blows me away. I mean, I know we as a city are in great financial shape, but as we all know, that's a huge number. So congratulations to the city and the council members for the last 40 years. The general fund reserve right now has $252 million in it, which again is absolutely outstanding. The general fund mainly is made up of property tax and sales tax to the tune of 75%. Their office vacancy is only 13%, and their retail vacancy is only 4%. So they're doing obviously extremely well.
Okay. Any others? All right, moving on to the next item, 9A3, requesting any new.
I have one more.
Okay, backing it up. Rewind that tape.
I attended the CASA board meeting, at which time we hired a new auditor. We approved our new budget. It unfortunately has a 3% dues increase in it. However, we did have 4 prior years with no increases, so we also looked at our own reserve policy. We have only 6 months of reserve set aside. We're going to increase that, I should say, in months. It's $800,000, and we're going to increase it to $1 million. Working on salary ranges again, and we're going back to the Willard Hotel in Washington next February.
All right, final call. Any other? All right, moving on to 9A3, requesting any new agenda items. Anyone?
The only thing I was going to say is I will not be here for the next meeting.
Is that a new agenda item?
No, it's just, I didn't think.
He wants us to talk about it.
No. I just, you could talk about me, but there is no spot for that, so I thought I'd throw it in there.
All right.
As some of you know, I actually have a couple of other things, but we're so late, I'll bring them up later. Some of you know I was the historian in the city for 12 years, and I have a couple of things that I'm going to give to Aaron. I've turned over most of my things either to the city or to DSRSD. Aaron's going to try and set up a display case, but this is the original San Ramon Village booklet. This is the VCSD booklet. These things are amazing, and this is 37 years of doing fire service. So like I said, I'm going to turn most of them over to Aaron, a couple of them over to the city, but anyway, you're welcome to look at them.
Are you going to get a picture with them as they're getting submitted?
I hadn't thought of that, but
Okay.
sure.
All right. With that, we'll move on to item 9B, staff report.
A few updates. The first annual Tri-Valley Water Conservation Art Contest is currently underway. And so if you go to Zone 7's website, you can vote through Saturday, May 10th. Maybe we'll get more award winners from our service area. And just there's a couple different events going on. I would encourage the board to check the board communications update for the full list. But I just wanted to highlight the Aqua Conference is next week from May 13th through 15th. President Goel and Vice President Halkett are attending along with senior management staff. And then our employee recognition event is on May 22nd, and hopefully the board can attend that as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that update. Moving on to item 10, adjournment. The meeting is adjourned at 8:25 p.m. Have a good evening.
Cool. Thank you.